Hey there, I hope you're doing well. My name is Arya and today we're going to look at some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy Reddit stories, consider liking, subscribing, and maybe hitting that notification bell too. Let's get started with today's first story. Much love, everyone. Today's first story comes from my wife cheated with my daughter's boyfriend and got epic revenge. Before that moment, life had already thrown its challenges. My way I grew up in a small town working through college and getting by as best I could. Hard work never intimidated me, but I always felt like something was missing. Marriage followed not out of love. Before that moment, life had already thrown its challenges. My way, I grew up in a small town working through college and getting by as best I could. Hard work never intimidated me, but I always felt like something was missing. Marriage followed not out of love, but more out of obligation, and that slowly drained whatever passion I once had for life. Every day became a checklist, a job, a house, and eventually a divorce. The divorce wasn't a shock. I was stuck in a dead-end job, doing the bare minimum, and my relationship at home wasn't any better. My wife at the time, Sheila, became increasingly distant, and one day I came home to find the house completely emptied. She had moved in with her lover, and from there my life began to fall apart. The next few years were a blur of trying to piece together a life that had never been solid from the start, which brings me to a typical morning in Honolulu, sitting at Starbucks sipping my usual frappuccino, a daily routine. The baristas knew by heart. The air was warm like it always is in Hawaii, and I felt the familiar tension between enjoying the moment and being haunted by my past. I reflected on the 5 years since Sheila left me and how much my life had changed since then. I get a few dirty looks from people in line when one of the girls brings my drink over with a cheerful "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell, maybe the tip helps with that." It was a typical Hawaiian day, clear skies with temperatures in the mid-70s and a mild breeze from the west off the ocean. Actually, that's a silly thing to say. Hawaii is in the middle of the Pacific, so the wind's always from the ocean, no matter which direction it's blowing. I sat outside at my small table under a palm tree which provided just enough shade to protect me from the sun, my driver Keanu, and I enjoyed the peace and quiet. I was trying to read the Wall Street Journal while Keanu was busy checking his eyelids for light leaks, but today my mind kept drifting back over the last 5 years. Yep. It's been 5 years since Sheila divorced me and ran off with her lover. Back then I was living in Western New York working as a tech for a big manufacturing company. I wasn't the best employee. To be honest, I was below average. I didn't try very hard and wasn't exactly ambitious whenever I finished a task. I'd just wait for the next one. Instead of seeking out more work, I'd usually hide out just like normal. One day after finishing my assigned task, I was browsing the web when my supervisor came into my cubicle. "The department manager wants to see you." He said it was an unusual request and I felt a bit uneasy. We walked to the elevators together. When we arrived at the manager's office, his secretary Margaret asked us to wait. "I believe Mr. Martin is on the phone. He'll see you shortly." She said that shortly turned into a 30-minute wait, the longest 30 minutes of my life. When we were finally called in, we weren't even offered a seat. "Jim," he started, "you've been with us for..." He paused to check the papers on his desk. 15 years. "I regret to inform you that we no longer need your services. You'll get a year's severance in any acred vacation in your next paycheck." And that was that. I was fired. What the hell was I going to do now? I was too old to start over. What would I tell Sheila? I packed up my things in a daze. I don't remember much about the next few hours, but I ended up in a bar downing my 3rd or 4th double when the bartender suggested I'd had enough. I drove home carefully. No point in getting a DWI. I thought I pulled into the garage, but drove right through the back wall. I figured Sheila must have had some work done to shorten the garage. The noise should have brought her out, but it didn't. When I got to the door, it was unlocked. I opened it to find an empty kitchen. The table, chairs, and even the appliances were gone. My first thought was, we've been robbed. I stumbled into the living room. Everything was gone. The room was as bare as the day we bought the house. My foggy brain didn't register the pile of my stuff in the middle of the room. I climbed the stairs to the bedroom and found the same emptiness. Well, not entirely empty. All my clothes were in a pile on the floor and the pile smelled bad. I soon realized the stench was urine. The closer I got, the worse it smelled. In my drunken state, I vomited right on top of the pile. I went back downstairs and curled up on the carpet. I can't say I fell asleep. I think I just passed out when I woke up the next morning. I had the worst hangover ever. My head pounded, my mouth tasted awful, and my body was stiff from sleeping on the floor. I stumbled to the garage and noticed my wife's car was gone. I made my way back to the kitchen thinking maybe some coffee would help, but there was none. She took that too. It took a few minutes for my brain to fully wake up before I noticed the note on the counter. I picked it up and started reading. Jim, we've been married for almost 14 years. In that time, you've turned out to be a loser. You're not a good husband, provider, or lover. You're selfish and only care about your own needs. I've moved in with my lover and will be contacting a lawyer to start divorce proceedings. Sheila. Well, I guess I knew how the rest of the day would go. Sheila worked as a legal secretary for a big law firm. I suspected she was upgrading to one of the attorneys and planned to use the firm to take me down. Thank God, we didn't have kids. I was pretty mad, so I looked for the house phones. They were all gone. At least I still had my company cell phone. They hadn't asked for that back. Yet, as one last act of defiance, I called the bank and reported my wallet stolen. A helpful woman froze all my credit cards, checking, and savings accounts. The debit card was blocked too. I hung up with a smile on my face. Please share your enthusiasm for this story with us. Press A if you found the video entertaining. In that case, hit B. I am truly motivated to collect more inspiring and significant stories by your feedback. Sheila was going to be furious when she couldn't use any of our joint cards. I packed what I could into my car. She had taken all the luggage. I couldn't even find a garbage bag. She took everything. One reason someplace else was my favorite bar was because it was owned by my best friend since childhood. The only person I trusted completely, so I headed there for advice. Bartenders give the best advice, and my friend had an ex-wife, so he might know a good divorce attorney. I also had to figure out how to hide my final check from Sheila. I didn't want her to get it when I walked into the bar. Martin poured me a double after last night. I figured you needed one, he said with sympathy. I downed it in one gulp. He looked shocked. I wasn't the type to drink that fast. So I told him everything, starting from when I left the bar the night before. By the time I finished, I had the name of his divorce lawyer, a place to stay in the apartment above the bar, and an IOU for the amount of my severance check. Martin agreed to include the check in one of his deposits and give me the money as I needed it. Time passed, and so did the divorce. A year later, I found myself divorced and living in a small one-bedroom apartment in a sketchy neighborhood. My dear wife had hired a shark of a lawyer. She worked for the firm after all, and she cleaned me out. She got the house, the investment account, and our checking and savings accounts. She almost got alimony, but since I had no job or money, the judge took pity on me and waived it. Lucky for me. No one asked about the severance check. It might seem like Sheila made out well, but the house was underwater on the mortgage. The savings account had less than $000. The checking account was drained by monthly bills, and the 401k had barely $2,000. Best of all, most of the credit cards were maxed out. Sheila must have gone on a spree before the divorce was final. I think she planned on leaving me with the debt, but since I had no income, the judge stuck her with the bills. It took a week to wipe the smile off my face. Eventually, I had to get a job. I ended up working as a janitor for the school district, pulling night shifts. My days were spent either on my computer or hanging out at my friend's bar. Guess what I did with all my free time there? I was well on my way to becoming a heavy drinker. One morning I found a Powerball ticket in my pocket. I didn't remember buying it, but I knew the bar sold them. I tossed it on my desk and went to the bathroom after taking a shower and brewing some coffee. I noticed the ticket again once my PC booted up. I checked the numbers on the Powerball website. I triple-checked the ticket the numbers match. There was only one winner and the jackpot was $250 million, yet millions. I quickly signed the back of the ticket. Next I called my divorce lawyer. It was Sunday, so I got his answering machine a couple of hours later. He called back. Apparently, he didn't have much going on that day either. I won, I told him. We set up a meeting for Monday. The next day we spent hours discussing trusts, investments, tax strategies and, most importantly, how to make sure my ex didn't get any of the money. It took almost a month to set up all the accounts and finalize everything. 2 weeks later, I was looking at property in Hawaii. I wanted a luxury place on one of the hills near Hawaii, Kai, a suburb of Honolulu. It took almost a year to get the house just how I wanted it now. I'm finally settled in and enjoying the good life. My favorite memory from this time was when I got a call from my lawyer. Apparently, my ex-wife had heard about my lottery win and wanted to talk. My lawyer shut her down immediately. That's when I knew I'd picked the right guy, so there I was sipping my frap and lost in thought. When I got that strange feeling of being watched, I was about to alert my driver, but then I looked around and noticed a little girl, maybe 5 or 6, staring at me. She had long dark hair and the most beautiful blue eyes I'd ever seen, but they were full of sadness. She was clutching a small doll and holding a blanket to her nose. She tugged at my heart and all I wanted to do was hug her and take her problems away. I gave her my friendliest smile. I didn't want to scare her. At the same time, I scanned the area for a parent. Surely no responsible parent would let a child wander around like this, but I saw no one. I signaled one of the counter girls and using some improvised gestures asked her, "Who is she?" She asked the others, but they all just shrugged. By then a few women sitting nearby had noticed. When I looked at them, they all shook their heads. No one knew the girl. She started to tear up. So I gave her a soft smile and handed her my clean handkerchief. She took it but just stood there holding it. I gently wiped her tears away and in return she gave me a small smile and handed back the now dirty hanky. A couple of the women came over to talk to the little girl. One pulled out her phone and called emergency. I heard her tell the operator about a lost child after she hung up. She turned to me and said 5 minutes. The little girl began making soft noises. So I ran my fingers through her hair and gave her a gentle kiss on the top of her head. She looked up at me and said, "Grea BBY." It had been 20 years, but I recognized the phrase. She was speaking Italian. Thank you, Grandpa. Back in the late 80s I'd been stationed in Italy with the US Army and learned quite a bit of the language. If you wanted to get anywhere with the local women, speaking Italian was essential, and now this little girl was speaking Italian. "Bella, ciao ilo n. A Jim," I said, which means hi beautiful. "My name is Jim." Her eyes lit up and she smiled widely, hugging me even tighter. "Bella." I asked her meaning. "What's your name, beautiful?" She responded, "Bella." I tried a few more times to get a different answer, but all she would say was Bella, so I shifted gears. "Aqua water?" I asked. She smiled a little, so I took her hand and we walked into Starbucks. As we looked at the drink cooler, one of the baristas made her a small caramel frappuccino. After just one sip, Bella was hooked. She smiled at the barista and said grazie. We returned to my table and Bella sat beside me, sipping her treat slowly. I noticed a Honolulu police cruiser pull up. So I waved at the officers. They came over and I explained that Bella seemed either lost or abandoned. One officer tried speaking to her in English, but it wasn't working. His frustration was clear, and that's when his partner saw the smile on my face. "Do you know why she's not talking to us?" the officer asked me. I nodded. "She only speaks at Italian." "My Italian is rusty. It's been 20 years, but I've managed a bit." "Do you have anyone who speaks the language?" At that moment, Bella tugged on my shirt and whispered, "B." I understood, bathroom. I asked, looking at one of the women nearby. I asked her to help Bella, but Bella wouldn't go alone, so the three of us went together. I waited in the hall and Bella called out a couple of times just to make sure I was still there. When we got back, the police told me they couldn't find anyone who spoke Italian, so they called Child Protective Services. CPS and a caseworker was on the way 2 hours later. After having lunch with the officers and Bella at McDonald's, she knew exactly what she wanted. We returned to Starbucks. A furious caseworker was waiting for us, immediately yelling at the officers. "Why did you make me wait so long? You wasted my time." She shouted. The officers weren't having any of her attitude, and soon a shouting match broke out. Bella was scared, so I took her away from the noise. The worker saw me and screamed, "He's stealing that child, stop him." I pulled out my phone and made some calls. I had been a major donor to the governor's campaign, and I figured it was time to cash in on that favor. I explained who I was and the situation to one of the governor's aides. The reply was simple: "I'll take care of it." About 5 minutes later, the caseworker's phone rang. She answered it, rudely, clearly ready to yell, but suddenly went quiet. I could hear her saying, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir," repeatedly. While she was still on the call, an unmarked police car arrived. I recognized the man who got out. It was the chief of police. He briefly spoke with the officers before walking over to the caseworker. "Hang up the phone, get in your car, and leave. That's an order. If you don't comply, I'll have you arrested," he said. The caseworker quickly left. The chief then approached my table with the 2 officers and introduced himself. "Did either of my officers treat you poorly or act discourteously during your interactions?" He asked. "No, sir. They were polite and helpful. They've been trying to find a translator to help communicate with the girl," I responded. The 2 patrol officers smiled at me. The chief sat down and we began discussing little Bella. The officers returned to their patrol duties while we brainstormed what to do with my new little friend. We decided that Bella would stay with me until her parents or relatives were found, and they would continue to look for an Italian translator. My driver had gone back to my house to do some yard work, so I called to arrange for a pickup. The rest of the afternoon would be spent shopping for a wardrobe of little girl clothes for Bella. We headed to Alamo Moana Mall for a busy afternoon of shopping, and I asked my driver's wife Alani, who was also my housekeeper, to come along and help pick out clothes for Bella. Keanu and Anani arrived about 15 minutes later on the ride to the mall. Anani asked me all about Bella. Once we got there, the girls visited all the children's stores while Keanu and I made multiple trips to the car carrying bags. If I recall correctly, we went to the Disney store, Gap, Kids, Jimmy, Janie and Jack, and the Children's Place. We didn't buy something at every store, but we certainly tried. My American Express card got quite the workout. Bella and Alani became fast friends. They chatted the whole time, neither understanding the other, but that didn't matter. They spoke the universal language of women shopping. I don't recall which store it was, but both of them stopped to stare at little girls' bedroom furniture sets. We didn't go inside, thankfully, but I had a feeling we'd be back by the time we finished shopping. It was too late to cook dinner. I was elected to treat everyone, so I suggested Antipastas on South Baitania Street in downtown Honolulu. I thought maybe someone there would speak Italian or could direct me to someone who did. After all, it was an Italian restaurant. Though no one there spoke Italian, the owner promised to keep an ear out for a native speaker. He was 4th-generation Italian, and most of his Italian-speaking relatives had long since passed, but the food was great and Bella loved her pizza, eating almost the whole thing. It was getting late as we left the restaurant. We hadn't even hit the freeway before both Bella and Alani were sound asleep in the back seat. Shopping really does wear you out. When we got home, Kino and I unloaded the bags into one of the spare bedrooms. Alani and I settled Bella into the room next to mine, dressing her in a pair of Disney pajamas and helping her get cleaned up for bed. After Keanu and Alani left, I decided to have a small drink before heading to bed. As I sat on the Lenny gazing at the stars, I heard a small voice call Poppy. I went inside to find Bella huddled in a corner softly crying. It broke my heart. I picked her up and carried her out to my chair on the Lenny. She cuddled in my lap, and soon she was back asleep. We spent the night in the lounge chair. I was stiff the next morning, but it was worth it. Alani woke us up asking what we wanted for breakfast. I looked at Bella and said, "Man, you eat." She jumped up, grabbed Elani's hand, and they headed to the kitchen shortly after. Bella proudly brought me a cup of coffee, chatting away as if I understood everything she said. I helped her set the cup on the table to avoid spills, and she stood there watching me intently. I realized she was waiting for me to take a sip. I did, and with great enthusiasm. I said, "Perfetto." She beamed from ear to ear. I noticed Alani standing in the doorway, watching with a smile. "Way to go, boss. Now go take a shower while Bella and I make breakfast," she said. "One thing my mother taught me: always listen when a woman gives you an order," so I headed for the bathroom. As I was finishing up, I heard Bella's little voice call, "Poppy, prima cale on breakfast." When I opened the door there, she was waiting for me. She took my hand and led me to the kitchen, where the table was set with my finest china. The silverware was placed haphazard, but I gave her a big thumbs up for that. I got a smile and a hug. After breakfast, I started making calls, pulling in favors and using other forms of persuasion to find a translator. As much as I was getting attached to Bella, I knew there had to be someone out there looking for her. She was too special a little girl to be lost forever. Let me pause and describe my estate. When I bought the property, there was a small guest house behind the main house. Since I didn't have any in-laws, I rented it out to vacationers on a monthly basis. The estate was part of a gated compound with top-notch security, so I charged a high rent because of the location and privacy. I usually attracted famous people who wanted to stay under the radar. By current tenants had arrived the night before. All I knew about them was that it was a husband, wife, and their small child. The wife was the breadwinner with a high-profile job on national news, as Bella and I were enjoying breakfast. I heard a voice say, "Excuse me, could I borrow some milk for coffee and our child's cereal?" I knew there wouldn't be any food left in the guest house between renters. We always threw everything out because of the humidity. I smiled and replied, "No, but why don't you all join us for breakfast? I'm sure there's nothing to eat over there and we have plenty of food." After a bit of hesitation, he agreed and went back to fetch his wife and child. When they returned, we introduced ourselves and sat down to enjoy one of Ali's wonderful meals. I took the opportunity to explain Bella's situation, hoping they might know someone who spoke Italian. Unfortunately, they didn't, but the news anchor was clearly intrigued by the story. We were all enjoying coffee, for my Keurig and Alani had brought out a selection of drinks, coffees, teas, and hot chocolates for the kids. My guests had fun exploring the choices. Suddenly my house phone rang. Alan answered, then handed it to me. After a brief conversation, "Good morning," I said. A formal voice responded, "Please hold for the ambassador." Then I was placed on hold. A moment later, a man with a pleasant voice and a slight Italian accent came on the line. "Mr. Douglas, I am the ambassador to the United States from Italy. I understand you have found the child of one of our citizens." "Yes, sir," I replied, and I explained how Bella had been found and what we'd done so far. He listened quietly until I finished, then asked to speak to her. I handed the phone to Bella. "Pronto," she said for the next half hour. She listened and occasionally responded with a CI or some rapid Italian that I couldn't follow. Finally, she gave me back the phone. The ambassador summarized their conversation. Bella didn't know her real name, parents, or even her birthday. She'd been kept by her stealers in small rooms, chained up since infancy. Her food was placed in metal bowls on the floor, and she was only allowed to wear the shift she was found in. She had only ever been called Girl, the only name she knew. The ambassador said they were sending a representative to investigate her background further. He added that they had looked into my background and decided that Bella would stay with me until her situation was resolved. The representative would arrive in 3 days and stay with us during the invitation. Bella and I were both agreeable to the plan. I spent the next hour answering questions from everyone at the table. When they finally finished, the chief of police showed up. I filled him in on the morning's events. Somehow it was decided that Bella needed a proper little girl's bed. Guess who got volunteered to buy one? Keanu brought the car around while Alani-dressed Bella. Our renters decided to join us at the mall, though I suspected the husband wasn't thrilled about spending his vacation day shopping with little effort. I convinced him to spend the day at the golf course. Instead, we all fit comfortably into my Bentley. I drove us to Alamana Mall, while Keanu dropped the husband off at the golf course. Bella recognized the mall, and when I told her we were getting her a bed, she cried tears of joy. She practically dragged me to the store where she'd seen the pink bedroom set the day before. Ala Moana is a big mall, but Bella navigated it like a pro, leading us straight to the store without a single wrong turn. I'm convinced she'll be a fantastic shopper when she grows up, though Bella didn't fully grasp all the nuances of shopping, yet she was learning quickly. All she knew was that she wanted the pink bed and the giant teddy bear that came with it. I handed Alani my gold card and she and Bella went off with the sales lady to pick out sheets, pillows and everything else to make Bella's room feel like hers. Everything was scheduled for delivery and set up by 5 p.m. Bella would be sleeping in her very own pink princess bed. That night we were a happy bunch, so we stopped at the food court for some junk food and ice cream. Bella was overwhelmed. She had never seen anything like the food court. She wanted to try everything, but Alani, ever the health food enthusiast, quickly put a stop to that. Still, Bella managed to sneak in a bit of junk food. She was just too charming to resist. At 3 p.m. we arrived home to find a large furniture truck already waiting. Bella's new bedroom set had arrived. The movers had most of the items off the truck, setting them in front of the garage waiting for us. Bella was so excited that she walked right up to the biggest mover and started speaking to him in Italian. Soon they were walking hand in hand into the house, with Bella leading the way. She took him directly to the bedroom next to mine, pointing at the existing furniture and mimicking how they should move it into the hall and then into the empty room next door. The movers loved it. Before long, Bella was in charge, directing the movers, who were happy to follow her lead. By 6 p.m. everything was set up just as Bella wanted. I walked the movers out to their truck and handed each of them $100 as a tip. At first they tried to refuse, saying Bella was a joy to work with and the tip wasn't necessary. But I insisted and they eventually accepted. Back inside, Bella, Alani, and my renter began organizing Bella's clothes and belongings into the drawers and storage spaces. Although we had bought what seemed like a lot of clothes, the drawers still looked quite empty. Once everything was put away, I realized more shopping trips were in my future. I sent Keanu to pick up food and retrieve the golfer, while Bella gave me a tour of her new room. The giant teddy bear was placed in the center of her bed, holding her little doll in its arms. Bella walked over to the bed, pointed to the big bear and said, "Poppy." Then she pointed to the doll and said, "Bella." That simple gesture moved me to tears. Bella reached into her dress pocket and pulled out the handkerchief I had given her the day before she came over, pulled me down to her level and gently wiped my tears away. That night I wore pajamas to bed, knowing I might have a visitor in the middle of the night. Sure enough, I did this time, though Bella wasn't scared. She just wanted to cuddle. Later that week, I received an email from the Italian embassy, giving me the flight number and arrival time for Bella's tutor, Miss Gina Castillo Keanu, and I waited in the arrival lounge when Gina came through the gate. She was stunning: dark hair, olive skin, dark eyes and about 5 feet 6 inches in tall. I'm not great at guessing a woman's weight, but she had a perfect figure and the business suit she wore only enhanced her looks. "Wow," I muttered, trying to hide my surprise. We exchanged the usual greetings and after everyone was introduced, Gina squatted down to introduce herself to Bella in Italian. They chatted for a good 5 minutes. When Gina stood up, Bella was holding her hand. I felt a slight pang of jealousy, but Bella quickly pulled Gina over to me and took my hand as well. We left the airport with Bella walking between us, holding both of our hands at baggage claim. Gina pointed out 2 small bags. I thought not much luggage and hoped she was having more sent later. When we got home, Keanu took her bags to one of the spare rooms, while Bella gave Gina a grand tour, proudly showing off her pink bedroom. The afternoon was busy. Bella and Gina talked non-stop. Even through dinner, they disappeared into the back of the house, and about an hour later, they reappeared. Bella was in her pajamas and Gina wore a long house coat. Both looked fresh and clean. Bella kissed me goodnight and said something to Gina in Italian. Gina laughed and turned to me. Bella wants to know if you're still going to tuck her in or if you'll be tucking me in. Instead, she teased. I must have looked shocked because Bella said something else and Gina laughed again. Bella also wants to know if it's still okay to climb into bed with you. If she gets scared or if I'll be upset about it. She seems to think we'll be sleeping together. Gina explained, clearly amused by the situation. I was stunned trying to think of what to say, while Gina just smiled after tucking Bella into her new bed. I went looking for Gina and found her on the Lenny sipping a glass of wine. I poured myself a strong Crown Royal on the rocks and joined her. We need to talk, I said. Gina gave me a serious look. Absolutely, she replied. I've learned a lot about Bella. Today, I'm angry, I said. She chuckled. I was just teasing earlier. You need to relax. First of all, Bella has never had any formal education or maternal bonding. She's essentially raised herself. Her language skills are similar to a 4-year-old. She's never been taught basic hygiene and she's never received affection in her entire life. I nodded as I processed what she was saying. Well, her language didn't seem that far off. I figured she was around 5 or 6. Gina shook her head. Sorry, but based on what I can tell, she's closer to 10 or 11. Gina went on to explain her qualifications as a child. Philologist, educated in Rome and Switzerland. Bella was essentially a blank slate, and we had the opportunity to help shape her into a productive member of society. I was determined to help. Bella thinks of this place as hers too. Gina noted. You need to be careful how you refer to it around her. I was still trying to process her age, but Gina kept going. Next, I'll begin teaching her English as her English improves. I want you to start reading to her at bedtime. It will help her learn the language and also help her understand affection. We need to mimic the early bonding experiences children usually have. I can do that, I said, feeling proud. The next step is to model affection between adults, hand-holding, simple kisses, hugs and touches, she added. It sounds like you've set up a lot of work for us, I said. How long will you be staying, and does your husband or boyfriend mind? I asked, hoping I wasn't crossing a line. She smiled. I don't have anyone in my life right now. As for how long, we'll see. Get some rest and make sure Bella joins you if she gets lonely, she added. I must have looked confused, so she clarified, not me. Bella. In the following weeks, Gina fit seamlessly into the household. She and Bella were inseparable. Like two parts of a whole. Wherever Bella was, Gina wasn't far behind. Gina was patient, always teaching Bella, blending Italian and English in a smooth rhythm. Soon Bella began answering more in English. The next surprise came when the UPS driver delivered several boxes full of school books. Gina had arranged for homeschooling, but was eager to learn, diving into the lessons with excitement. Gina set up a little classroom in one of the spare rooms, and they spent at least 4 hours each morning on Bella's education. After lunch, they did girl things, as they called it, and sometimes continued lessons before dinner. When Gina wasn't available, I stepped in as the teacher. Bella would diligently ask questions in English, and under Gina's strict orders, I answered only in English. Bella would sit with her Italian-English dictionary, flipping through pages, trying to understand my responses. The more she flipped, the more I knew I had confused her, but every day her comprehension grew and my pride in her progress. Deep in 2 months flew by, and I was truly impressed by Bella's improvement. Gina was an amazing teacher. One morning during breakfast, I got a call from Washington, D.C. It was the Italian ambassador. It turned out that we had become the talk of morning news shows. My renter, the news anchor, had done a feature on child stealings with Bella as the focal point. There were clips of Bella smiling, holding hands with Gina and me, and footage of her at Starbucks in the mall. The ambassador and I talked at length, mostly about Bella's safety. Despite all efforts, the Italian government couldn't locate any family for her. No parents, no siblings, nothing. Bella was essentially an orphan. Unless someone adopted her, she would be sent to an Italian orphanage. I didn't hesitate. I'll adopt her, I said without a second thought. The ambassador chuckled. I knew you would, but I had to ask. He promised to handle the necessary arrangements, but his next question caught me off guard. What about Gina? Once you adopt Bella, her role will end. She's attached to the embassy. I was stunned. Bella would be devastated if Gina left. Could we get her a work visa? I could hire her as a tutor, I suggested. The truth was I enjoyed having Gina around. She was more than just a tutor. She had become a vital part of the household and, if I was being honest, I felt a growing connection between us. The ambassador said talk to her and let me know that night. After Bella went to bed, Gina and I had our first serious conversation. I told her about my decision to adopt Bella. I expected her to be happy, but instead she exploded. You're a good man, Jim, but you're an idiot, she yelled, her Italian temper flaring. Do you even understand the responsibility of adopting her? You can't just make such a huge decision without considering the consequences, she paced, clearly angry. I stood there speechless. I just want to give her a family, a real chance at life. She stopped and softened her tone. I know your heart's in the right place, but this isn't just about you or Bella, it's about her future, and we need to make sure it's the right decision for her. We talked late into the night, going over every aspect. Ultimately, we agreed the decision should be Bella's. She had to choose me or it wouldn't work for the next month. Gina was distant. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, unsure. If I had ruined everything, then one morning when Keanu and I returned from grabbing coffee, Gina and Bella were waiting at the door. Bella ran to me, hugging me tightly while Gina wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me. You're a wonderful man, Gina said softly. The ambassador called. The papers are being FedEx papers, I asked, confused. Don't act dumb, she smiled. I know you've been planning everything, adopting Bella and arranging my visa so I can stay that night. I had two precious girls in my bed. Bella was in her usual spot and Gina was spooned against my back. I slept better than I had in years. The next morning I woke up to the feel of Gina pressed against me. It was a great way to wake up, and I could have stayed like that all day, but Bella was curled up behind me, so I had to move carefully as I slipped out of bed. I heard both of them grumbling in unison. I went to the bathroom, shaved, and got in the shower. Halfway through, I felt a draft. Gina had pulled back the curtain, smirking playfully. Not bad, she teased before leaving. I started to respond, but then I heard Bella's voice outside. I made a mental note to research summer camps for Bella, so Gina and I could have some alone time, but it turned out there weren't any overnight camps nearby. The next couple of years flew by. Bella started calling Gina and me mommy and daddy without us even noticing. When it began, Gina moved into my bedroom permanently and Bella stopped coming to our room. At night our little family was becoming more solid. Bella began attending school with kids her age and fit in effortlessly. She made easily, and soon our house became the go-to spot for her friends. Every weekend at least a couple of her friends stayed over. Alani loved it. Since her grandchildren lived in California, Bella and her friends became like her own grandkids. One time I asked Alani if taking care of so many kids was too much for her. Big mistake. I quickly learned Hawaiian women have tempers and are very skilled with knives. One Sunday Bella sat on my lap and looked up at me with her big blue eyes. Poppy, when are you going to ask mommy to marry you? She asked. You know she loves you and you love her besides. I want a baby, sister, or brother before you're too old. Her words floored me, but after a moment I realized she was right. You're right, Bella, I said, pulling her close. How about you help me pick out a ring? Her eyes lit up and she eagerly nodded. The next afternoon after school, we went ring shopping. Bella had a list of all the jewelers on the island and insisted on visiting every single one. What Bella wanted, Bella got. After weeks of shopping, we ended up back at the very first store we had visited. The ring we chose was simple but elegant, a single diamond, surrounded by small birthstones representing Bella. Gina and me, the jeweler, even offered to add more stones if we had more children, which made Bella's face light up. she approved and I paid for the ring. Once the ring was settled, Bella took charge of planning the proposal. Poppy, you're the best dad, but you don't understand women. I'll handle the proposal, she said confidently, and plan she did. She and Alani worked out every detail for a special dinner. They chose the anniversary of the day. Bella first found me at Starbucks, a date that held meaning for both of us. On the evening of the proposal, Alani outdid herself, with a delicious dinner as dessert was served. Alani placed the ring box on Gina's plate. Gina stared at it, tears streaming down her face without even opening the box. Bella, being Bella, broke the silence. Well, aren't you going to open it? She asked with a grin. Gina shook her head, still crying, and didn't move to touch the box. Bella looked at me frustrated. Well, ask her already, she demanded. So I did. Gina, will you make me the happiest man in the world and marry me? Not the most poetic proposal, but I'm no Shakespeare. Then Bella chimed in, say, yes, so you can start making me a brother or sister. Gina picked up the box with trembling hands, tears still falling, and whispered, yes, yes, yes. The next 3 months were a whirlwind of wedding planning. Gina and Bella obsessed over every detail. They chose a beautiful park in Waikiki for the ceremony and even arranged for a Catholic priest to officiate. The reception was set at my country club and the guest list quickly ballooned from 200 to over 400. Bella was the bridesmaid and Keanu was my best man, close friends, and even some of Gina's colleagues from the Italian embassy in Washington were invited with all expenses covered. Gina's family from Italy, her sister, brother, and their families were invited as well, along with a few distant cousins. I ended up renting several floors of a beach hotel for the out-of-town guests. The cost, let's just say it was better not to think about it when it came to the wedding dress. I wasn't allowed to do anything except pay for it, but I did join Gina and Bella to pick out tuxedos. I thought it would be a quick decision. How wrong I was. Gina and Bella spent the entire afternoon making sure my tuxedo was perfect, nearly driving the poor tailor to a nervous breakdown with all the changes. Thankfully, it was a simple black tuxedo with a white shirt. I can't imagine the chaos if I'd wanted something more elaborate. After that Real, I vowed to take a year-long cruise around the world. When Bella got married, only returning the day before the wedding. To avoid the stress, I simply couldn't handle it. Keanu found the whole situation hilarious, laughing every time he saw me. I joked about firing him after the wedding, which only made him laugh harder. The big day finally arrived, but I wasn't allowed at home for the days leading up to it. Instead, I stayed in a hotel with Gina's relatives, who turned out to be a lively and fun group. Despite the language barrier, my broken Italian and their broken English, we bonded over my credit card. Then the moment came there. I was standing at the makeshift altar with the priest when this stunning vision in white started down the aisle. Gina, my soon-to-be wife, looked like a dream. The rest of the day went by in a blur. I remember saying I do the reception, all the congratulations, and most vividly the wedding night. That night we started trying for a baby, though it took about 5 months due to Gina being on the pill. Our honeymoon was a blissful 3 weeks in Italy, where Gina showed me her homeland. Every night felt special and I hated to leave. Still, returning to Hawaii didn't feel too bad either. It was hard to say who was more excited, me, Gina, or Bella, who helped with everything for the baby's room, sent out shower invitations, and attended every OB visit with Gina. However, Gina drew the line at the labor room. Only I was allowed, and our son Jorgo Douglas was born on a beautiful May afternoon, weighing 83 pounds when Bella was finally allowed in the room. She went straight to him and said, "Hi Giorgio, I'm your big sister, welcome to our home." The nurse let Bella hold him briefly before handing him to Gina for feeding. Bella watched intently, discovering the wonder of life and realizing her place in it. The hospital stay lasted 2 days, which felt like an eternity for Bella. She took the day off from school and was up at dawn, ready to go. She supervised everything, Keanu installing the baby seat, organizing the diaper bag, and, of course, selecting baby toys. She even lectured Kino on driving safely, reminding him, "You're driving my brother home." I knew I'd need to give Keanu a Christmas bonus for his patience. Bella had plans to show Giorgio all the sights on the way home, but he slept through the entire ride. The first few months with a baby were, as expected, full of eating, sleeping and diaper changes. Bella spent all her free time watching Giorgio and asking Gina endless questions. If I wanted any time with Bella, I had to carry Giorgio out of the room, because she'd follow him like a magnet. I'll never forget the day Giorgio, about 3 or 4 months old, recognized his sister and gave her a big toothless grin. From that moment, Bella was hooked, becoming the perfect big sister. Whenever Bella's friends came over, they were treated to endless stories about Giorgio's latest milestones. Being girls, they loved it. It was adorable to see them gather around during diaper changes, though it was even funnier when one or two got caught in a shower during the process. They'd complain, of course, but they adored him. A year went by without any major events. Until one day, Gina and Bella returned from their annual physicals. Bella was unusually quiet and they disappeared into Bella's room with a pamphlet from the doctor. I suspected Gina was giving her the talk, which, of course, dads aren't invited to. They spent the whole afternoon in Bella's room, but by dinner, Bella seemed back to normal. Gina held my hand during the meal and gave me a look that said, "We'll talk later." That night Gina explained what they had discussed with the doctor. The takeaway: I was to keep my mouth shut and not embarrass Bella. A week later, the doctor's office called asking us to bring Bella in for some additional tests. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time. We went through a series of appointments at the hospital and the lab. Soon after we got the diagnosis Bella had leukemia, we had a family meeting with the oncologist who reassured us with phrases like "we caught it early and a bone marrow transplant with a little chemotherapy will do the trick." Most importantly, he told us Bella could live a long and productive life. I was worried about finding a donor since Bella and I weren't blood-rated, but her bone marrow type was common and finding a match wasn't an issue. Many of Bella's friends even volunteered to be tested, though none of them were used. It made Bella proud. When the transplant time came, Gina and I practically lived at the hospital. Bella received cards and letters from her classmates, and thankfully the transplant was a success. However, the oncologist still recommended chemotherapy as a precaution. Bella became a sick little girl and her hair fell out in solidarity. Gina and I shaved our heads too. The three of us must have looked quite a sight. Bella picked out headscarves for all of us, and while hers and Gina's looked nice, mine was a comical mix of strange colors and patterns. They'd snicker at me, but I didn't care as long as it helped Bella. One day I got a call from Bella's school. They asked if I could bring her in for a homecoming rally. When the day arrived, Gina and I escorted Bella into the gym only to be greeted by 200 bald teenagers. Bella's classmates had shaved their heads in support. Though weak, Bella held my arm and smiled from ear to ear. As the students chanted her name, she and Gina cried, and as for me, well, my eyes started watering. Prob from something in the air. About a year later we got the wonderful news the chemotherapy had worked and Bella was declared cancer-free just in time to start high school. We were overjoyed that night. I overheard Bella telling her 3-year-old brother that she would be there to help him grow up. I cried my eyes out. I hadn't realized until then that Bella had been contemplating end of life during her illness. Bella and Giorgio became inseparable after that. Wherever one went, the other followed. It got to the point where Gina and I decided to enroll Giorgio in preschool, giving him new experiences to share with Bella when he got home. Their bond grew even deeper and the years flew by. Gina and I also grew closer, especially after going through Bella's illness. Together, our relationship became like that of an old married couple, still physical, engaged once or twice a week, but no longer cuddling on the couch every night. Bella, sophomore and junior years passed quickly and soon we were discussing college plans. Bella didn't want to leave home, so she applied to Brigham Young University, Hawaii, which had a gorgeous campus near the Polynesian Cultural Center. During the Christmas holidays, I noticed Bella wasn't her usual cheerful self. I figured it was just the stress of the season and the looming college decisions, but shortly after we got a call from her school. Bella had collapsed and been rushed to the ER. The doctors ran tests and kept her overnight. The next morning, her oncologist came by and ordered more tests. That evening he sat us down. His words were simple: "It's back." Gina collapsed into my arms and Giorgio fled the room, unable to face the reality. I walked over to Bella's bed and said, "We'll beat this again. There are new treatments and you'll still graduate in the spring." The doctor took my arm and shook his head. "No," he said gently. "She has about 4 months." There was nothing more they could do. Gina collapsed again, but Bella hugged me from behind and whispered, "Just hold me, Poppy." We cried together. My little girl and I, Bella, didn't make it to the 4 months. The doctor predicted she passed away about 3 months later, with Gina and me holding her. Giorgio sat at the foot of her bed gripping her favorite teddy bear, tears streaming down his face. The funeral was somber, with most of Bella's senior class in attendance. They each carried simple white flower leis which they laid on her coffin, I'll admit it. I cried like a fool. My little girl was gone. That night I had my first dream of her. I saw a little girl with beautiful eyes watching me at Starbucks, and those eyes wouldn't leave me. I got up, grabbed a bottle from the bar and drank until I could sleep. That became my routine for months, but one morning as I reached for another bottle, I saw Alani watching me with disapproval. "It helps me forget," I said. "It eases the pain just for a while." She looked at me and said, "You've been drunk for 6 months. Gina wouldn't want this." Then she hit me with the hard truth. "Your wife and son have left you. They've gone back to Italy and they won't come back until you're sober." It took a moment for her words to sink in, but when they did, I knew she was right. I decided it was time to sober up. I opened another bottle, telling myself I'd start tomorrow or maybe the next day, but that Friday I checked into detox. After that, my plan was to go to Italy, reclaim my family, and do what Bella would have wanted her Poppy to do. I'm going to turn this one over to you. What do you make of this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, support, and time mean the world to me. So, thank you so much for being part of this. I really appreciate your time. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and much love.